What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Bets podcast. I'm Phil Perry, and we are, just for a brief second, going to actually move away from the quarterback position on today's episode. I know, but you can do it. I can do it. We can all handle this. We're all adults here. Let's move toward receivers. Let's move toward, even for a brief instant, offensive linemen, tackles in particular. How do the Patriots address those two needs? And yes, they are still needs on this roster in this year's draft. Can they do it? Is it feasible? We have a couple fantastic guests today that are going to help us out on this very topic. First, we're going to be bringing in NFL Media's Daniel Jeremiah. The great Daniel Jeremiah does a phenomenal job for the NFL Network and breaking down these prospects. We'll do a phenomenal job, I'm sure, on draft day. I'm asking him to put on his general manager's hat and help the Patriots out here. What does he do at 34 overall? What does he do at 68 overall? How does he address tackle? How does he address receiver? We're also bringing in, from CBS Sports, the Football Gameplan, Emory Hunt. One of my favorite conversations every single year before we get into the draft. One of the most knowledgeable draft experts that we have in the media space is Emory Hunt. All over the country for these college all-star games, broadcasting games in the fall, grinding away at his own personal draft guide, which you can find right now, and you can purchase that thing right now, that is inundating people with information on hundreds and hundreds of prospects deep into day 3 of the draft. All sorts of great detail on all of these guys. He's going to help us out at the receiver spot, not only identifying some potentially underrated names at the top of the board, but also as we get later and later into the draft, he's going to give you some names that you are going to want to keep your eyes on. Because especially at this receiver position, they have been found late before. Generally speaking, tackles, not so much. But receivers, every once in a while, you're able to uncover a gem because there are athletes everywhere. Whether it's Slippery Rock or University of Texas at San Antonio. We're going to talk about both those schools, by the way. There's talent out there at that position, and nobody has his finger on the pulse of what's going on at that spot on day 3. Maybe even beyond in the undrafted ranks like Emory does. But first, we're going to get to Daniel Jeremiah. You'll hear my question. You'll hear his answer. You'll hear a couple names. We're going to come back. Then I'm going to tell you my ideal scenarios for number 34 overall and number 68 overall, second and third round picks for the New England Patriots. But let's first get to DJ. Here he is. I have a question, actually. We talk so much about quarterbacks up here in Boston. I wanted to ask you about these other two major needs that the Patriots have on their roster right now, offensively, at receiver and at tackle. And I'm curious, in your opinion, is there an ideal way to address those two spots with the second and third picks that the Patriots have? Is there any chance they can hit big on those positions? Do you go tackle first, then receiver, vice versa? Do you have any names in mind for them that would be available in that range?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can definitely address those positions. Then it just becomes what order you want to do it in. When you start looking at the tackles and you start looking at where they are, 34 in the second round, 68 in the third, if you're looking for tackles at 34, that's almost a little bit of no man's land. I think I would keep an eye on a name like Jordan Morgan. He would probably factor into there. Teams around the league are a little bit split on Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma. I think we've had him in a lot of these mock drafts, assume he's going to go up there because he's really talented. He's raw, but he's really talented. But that would be one that maybe there's a chance he would get there. But I think Mims is gone. I think all those other guys are gone. So then you start talking about guys like Jordan Morgan. So that would be the name there in the second round. And when you look at wideouts, pick 68, I think there's a chance some of these wideouts get pushed down a little bit just because the sheer number of them. So, where I have these guys ranked, you might be looking at someone like a Malachi Corley, who's big time run after catch out of Western Kentucky. I'm curious to see where Keon Coleman's going to go. You see, some teams feel like he's, potentially a late one. Other teams feel like he's a third round guy. So that to me is kind of a fascinating thing to keep an eye on there.
All right, you heard a couple of interesting names there. Jordan Morgan from Arizona, somebody who's coming off an ACL injury and had a fine season last season, but maybe not wire to wire his best performance for Arizona. Are you getting something more than what you saw last season in Jordan Morgan because he's going to be further removed from said injury? I actually tweeted this type of thought process that I think evaluators are going through right now as it relates to Christian Mahogany, Boston College interior offensive lineman. If you were talking about Mahogany back in early 2022, so well before the 2022 season, just after the 2021 season, you would have been looking at this guy as the next first round pick out of BC to go and start right away and be an impact player on the interior and offensive line somewhere in the NFL. Freak injury, tears his ACL, misses all of 2022, comes back for 2023 and still has an excellent season. But he's still fairly close to the date of that devastating 2022 injury. So I think you're getting a better player in Christian Mahogany in 2024 than you got in 2023. And I think the same might be true for Jordan Morgan. To me, he's sort of a safe bet to be there at 34 overall. But he's not my ideal scenario for the Patriots at 34 overall. And let me just say this off the top. I agree with Daniel Jeremiah. You're probably going to want to go with the tackle in the second round as opposed to the receiver. Just because if those are positions of need and you're viewing them that way and you feel like you really need to fill them, because even if you told us, Elliot Wolf, that you feel like Chuck Okorafor can play left tackle for you tomorrow if you really needed to, do you want to bank on that? And I understand banking on a second round pick to do that might be just as much of a gamble. I get it. But this is a deep tackle draft, and I think you're going to get guys who can play and play early at the top of the second round at 34 overall, who might be able to compete and maybe even outperform somebody like Chuck Okorafor to play left tackle for you. So if that's the case, you're probably going to want to stick with the tackle position at 34. You're probably not going to want to wait until 68. Because if you do, I think your odds on hitting a starter, either in the immediate for 2024 or even a future starter, get less and less and less likely. So if you're really hoping to hit on both a receiver and a tackle in this draft, I think you have to go tackle at 34. To me, Morgan is the shrug your shoulders, let's go ahead and do this kind of pick. Because again, I think you're getting an ascending player who has shown some really promising signs in terms of his athleticism to be able to hold up at tackle and potentially even left tackle at the next level. Now, my holy bleep, that guy's still available? Ideal scenario for the Patriots at 34 overall is a name that Daniel Jeremiah mentioned, and it's Tyler Guyton. Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma, 6'8", 322 pounds, did make our prototypical Patriots tackles list this year. One of just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players. Only 7 tackles this year. Fit the mold, the Packers mold, of what they've drafted at that position in the first and second rounds since Ron Wolf took over Green Bay in the early 90s. But his disciples seem to have wanted something similar. No surprise. It's about size. It's about athleticism. It's about arm length in particular. His arms are over 34 inches. That's a check. Big time athlete. Jumped 34 and a half inches in the vertical, clocked a 1.76 10-yard split in his 40, had a relative athletic score, courtesy of Kent Lee Platt, of 9.70. That is elite, friends. Here's what I wrote for our prototypical Patriots list earlier this offseason. Guyton might, on paper, be the best fit for the new Patriots regime because of the number of boxes he satisfies when compared to other first and second rounders taken by Ron Wolftree front office chiefs. His hands measure 10.3 inches, and he posted an eye-opening 7.5 three-cone drill, 7.5 second three-cone drill. The vast majority of Guyton's experience is at right tackle, but he looks like he could play potentially even, because he's such a freaky athlete, tight end, given how he moves. With a little more polish from a technique-savvy offensive line coach, and that's exactly what Scott Peters is reputed to be. That's the new offensive line coach for the New England Patriots. Scott Peters, I'm told, among the best in the world when it comes to offensive line technique. Now, I think he's going to have some help from Ben McAdoo when it comes to the coordination of the run game which is often a part of your responsibilities as an offensive line coach. So I'm sure he will have some say there, Scott Peters, but that'll be new to him. But when it comes to the technique part, that part ain't new to him. And he is tremendous, according to people who have worked alongside him. Guyton could be, I continue on, could be the foundational corner piece the Patriots offensive line needs. Now, why might he be available at number 34 overall? Why is he not going to be a first-round pick? Doesn't make sense, right? I mean, go to Bob McGinn's write-up on golong.com. Our buddy Tyler Dunn just spoke to him for a podcast on his website just a few days ago about what the Patriots might do at 3 overall. But Bob McGinn been talking to scouts, executives for a long, long time and telling us what they think about the top players in the draft. He comes out as McGinn's number 6 overall tackle. He had one scout quoted as saying, if you watch the Florida State game, he being Guyton, actually dominated Jared Verse. Now, some people think Jared Verse might be the first defensive player off the board in this year's draft. First round edge defender type. Quote, he kicked his ass, absolutely dominated him, but he only steps up for big games. He went down to the Senior Bowl and stepped up. Thing is, once he gets comfortable, once he gets complacent, he's going to shut it down a little bit, it looks like. In the NFL, you have to step up to the challenge every week. He may be the biggest bust. He's an athletic freak, but he's just a mental midget. That is harsh at the end there. That is why he might be there at 34 overall. Can you get the best of Tyler Guyton? Do you think you can coach that out of him? Will you get the levels of motivation that you need in order to have somebody there that you feel can be your left tackle of the present and the future? That to me is the big question. Now, one of the reasons why, despite that kind of report from that one particular scout from Bob McGinn, one of the reasons why you may have seen some inconsistency from Guyton is because he hasn't played all that much, just 15 career starts. And 9 of those last year were at right tackle. The year before that, 4 of them at right tackle, just 1 at left tackle. So if that's how the league views him, if they believe he's a right tackle only, then maybe he does slip to the second round. I would say he's not. I think he's built to play left tackle. I think he could probably play both and play both very effectively given his frame and given his athleticism and what he has done in terms of his high-end performances. One NFL scout to Dane Brugler in The Beast says, quote, the OU coaches just marvel at him. They call him different than everyone else they've had. When you talk about coaches at a place like Oklahoma and the number of freaks, especially in the offensive line, that they have seen, I understand coaching staffs change. Things change year to year in the college game, especially nowadays. But that's a big-time Division I college program, and these coaches are marveling at this guy. It doesn't happen all that often. Dane's bottom line take on Guyton is he's a work in progress in several areas, and a steep learning curve should be expected for his rookie season, but he has the athletic tools and fundamental skills to develop into a high-level offensive tackle. He has the talent to play left or right, although his comfort level is clearly on the right side. As long as he stays motivated and healthy, he will continue on an upward trajectory. So there's that motivated question again. So Daniel Jeremiah is saying he might slip to the second round. Bob McGinn's talking to a scout who doesn't think Tyler Guyton's always the most motivated guy on the planet. And you hear it just mentioned there briefly that motivation could be an issue potentially for Tyler Guyton, according to Dane Brugler. But man, 6'8", 322. He actually weighed in at 330 at his pro day. 10 1/4 hand size. Almost 34.5-inch arms. These guys don't grow on trees. So that's my holy bleep. That guy's still there. Ideal scenario for the Patriots at 34 overall. Safe bet, Jordan Morgan will be there. Another safe bet, Kingsley Suamataia, who we've talked about time and again on this program. My guess is he'll be there. Big time athlete, good length, great athletic, 1.73 10-yard split in the 40-yard dash, 9'2" broad jump. This guy is explosive. He's violent. Penei Sewell's cousin. He's young. He's 21 years old. There's a lot to like there. And so of the safe bets to be there, personally, I'd rather see the Patriots take Suamataia. I think that's a higher upside pick. That's probably the big swing. I guess I'm really enjoying and appreciating the big swing approach, whether it's quarterback or tackle, with the Patriots' first 2 picks, because I like Drake May and I like Kingsley Suamataia. But Tyler Guyton, boy, if he's there, I don't know how you pass on him. Okay, so that takes us to the third round for receivers. Again, ideal scenarios. That's what we're trying to cook up here. But we're pick number 68 because remember, we just took Tyler Guyton at 34 overall. So all the way down at pick number 68, what might be there? Daniel Jeremiah brought up a great name and a name that I think the Patriots should consider, even if he's not that traditional body type that we're talking about the Patriots needing. He's not an X receiver. Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky, 5'11", 207 pounds. And he is not on our prototypical Patriots list for a variety of reasons, and they are all measurable. What I don't think you can measure that makes him valuable, especially if he's sitting there at the top of the third round, is this guy's playing style and his relentless hunger for yardage and for the goal line in particular. He is a freak with the ball in his hands. Absolutely devastating in terms of his ability to run through contact, his willingness to take on contact. He is in my opinion, culture setter because of his play style at the next level. He's been compared to Deebo Samuel in terms of how you could use him as sort of a big, burly, gadgety kind of offensive weapon. Is he the most polished route runner in the world? No, because he's in an offense that asks him to catch a lot of screens and see what we can do with them. But boy, when you have somebody who can get the ball in his hands the way he can and create explosive plays the way he can, that to me is a pretty nice combination and a pretty nice set of skills to, again, remember where we're picking now. We're not in the first round. We're hoping to take Brian Thomas. We're not at the bottom of the first or top of the second where, Xavier Legette might go, or even, further down in the second. Maybe Keon Coleman is still available, Florida State. These are big body dudes that you could see playing on the boundary and envision it pretty clearly. Even if Keon Coleman, maybe he's more suited to be sort of a big slot. Corley, I don't think is that. Although I wouldn't put anything past him given the way he plays football and the desire that he exhibits on a snap-to-snap basis. If they asked him to play on the outside, he might just say, hell yeah, thanks, coach. I'll go figure this out. 5'10" and a half, doesn't matter to me. He's got plenty of speed. The physicality is not going to be an issue. Contact balance to get through, weak, what, cornerback tackle attempts. It's really difficult to compare anybody to Deebo Samuel because he is such a rare NFL specimen. And at his height, a year or two ago, Deebo Samuel, there's nobody in the league like him. So really difficult for Malachi Corley or anybody else to live up to that standard. But he might qualify as a holy bleep. That guy's still there. Sort of ideal scenario at 68 overall. 9.2 yards after contact per reception over the last 2 seasons. Ridiculous. Yak King, Yak God, whatever you want to call him. That's Malachi Corley. So I'm going to call that my ideal scenario for the Patriots in the third round. Even though Devontae Walker might still be there, he does give you that boundary presence, that X receiver presence, that threaten the safety kind of player that you really need. But Malachi Corley, the skill set that he brings is different from somebody like KJ Osborne. It is different from Kendrick Bourne. It is different from Pop Douglas. Is it exactly what they need? No, but he might be too hard to pass on. And you might be trying to force something that may not be quite there for you the way you want it to be in the third round by saying, well, we need an X, so let's take Tez Walker. Now, you want to connect him with Drake May and give those guys that college connection that they had that turned them both into NFL prospects, or at least helped the process. I wouldn't blame you there. But you might be able to get your Z of the future, for instance, and Malachi Corley. And maybe you're just rolling the dice on X types, or maybe you're reserving that X role for trade down the line. I mean, who's to say? Trade weekend comes and goes, or draft weekend, comes and goes. And it turns into trade week. And all of a sudden, hey, maybe the Niners ran into a receiver that they really, really like. And now all of a sudden they've got the flexibility to be able to deal Brandon Ayuk. Do I think that's going to happen? I think they're going to try to win a Super Bowl next year. And I think their best bet to do that would be to keep Brandon Ayuk. I think the Bengals are going to try to win a Super Bowl next year. I think their best bet to do that would be to keep T. Higgins. But what if Brian Thomas falls to the Bengals in the first round? And they view him as an even better version of the guy they already have playing X, who's set to play on the franchise tag next year. Does Cincinnati turn around after the draft and say, hey, New England, or maybe even after night one, hey, what's up with that 34 overall pick? You guys want Higgins for it? Because, we've got our eyes on a tackle that might be there at 34, and we just drafted this receiver here in Brian Thomas. They play the same role. What do you think? You need a guy? We've got a guy. We're willing to trade you one of them. Now that changes everything. Now you don't have that second round pick to take the tackle, and our ideal scenario is up in smoke. But there are other ways to find X receivers. And if you want to find a great one, I think it's really hard to depend on that guy coming in the third round. So if it's the difference between taking a Z type, a flexible, can play anywhere, play him in the backfield, play him in the slot, play him outside occasionally, put him in motion, Deebo Samuel type of role. If it's a player you really like in that kind of role, as opposed to one where you've got your fingers and toes all crossed because you're just hoping it works out that you actually found a starting X in the third round, I might be willing to go and lean more toward the Deebo type. What if that's not the Patriots' ideal scenario at all? Because again, he ain't on our prototypical Patriots list of receivers this year. Malachi Corley, he's not. Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, Luke McCaffrey. Those are the three that checked every box of Packers front office types and the receivers they've drafted in the first and second round. You can find the piece on NBCSportsBoston.com, but I lay out the thresholds in a variety of different categories. Those three were the only three that checked every single box. So maybe they're saying to themselves, hey, if McMillan's there, the third. Yes, please. That's where we want to go. Maybe it's Johnny Wilson. Any chance it's Johnny Wilson? 6'6", 231. But boy, he moves like a receiver. If you watch him play, he moves like a receiver. And some of the testing would back that up. 4.11 short shuttle. Really impressive, especially for somebody that size. Low 4.5s in the 40. You know who else was in the 4.5s in the 40? Devontae Adams. That worked out pretty well. Jordy Nelson. That worked out pretty well. But Packers types like Elliott Wolf aren't going to be spooked by a 40 time that's not in the 4.4s. And Johnny Wilson, if he figures out how to use that ridiculous wingspan and that catch radius, 6'6", 231, the fluidity with which he moves, maybe that's their ideal scenario in the third round. Maybe it's somebody like Javon Baker out of Central Florida, 6'1", Alabama transfer, 202 pounds, 4.54 in the 40. Again, not the biggest deal in the world, at least to people that studied under Ron Wolf. Does he bring enough of contested catchability, route running ability, toughness on the outside that they would say, no, that's a guy who, if he was at Alabama, he'd be a lock second round pick, maybe even sniffing the first. But he goes to UCF. People shrug their shoulders. They say it's just UCF. And now all of a sudden he's available to us at 68. Are you kidding me? You know who has takes on Javon Baker? It's our guy, Emory Hunt. Let's get to him right now. And just to wrap up, ideal scenarios. The holy bleep. That guy's still there for us. Sort of scenarios for the Patriots. Tyler Guyton at 34. And you keep him motivated in a variety of different facets. Tyler Guyton at number 34 overall. You take care of your left tackle need there, even though he's played primarily right tackle at Oklahoma. Too many skills to pass on if he ends up falling to the top of the second round. And then in the third round, for me personally, I've got Xavier Legette off the board. I've got Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan. from Washington, both potentially off the board. I think both those guys could end up being second-round picks. Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy, Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell. All these guys are gone at pick number 68. I like the idea of Malachi Corley. I really do. But let's get to our conversation right now with Emory Hunt, because boy, oh boy, he has takes that will knock your socks off when it comes to the top of this receiver board. Then he's going to give you some names that might be ideal fits for the Patriots, whether it's at 34 or 68 that he likes. And then we're going to go even deeper than that. Real deep. Small school prospects, day 3, late day 3 prospects, potentially undrafted free agent types of prospects. But boy, oh boy, does he have intel, including, did you know there's 3 Hall of Fame receivers that have offspring in this year's draft class? You knew about Marvin Harrison's kid. You knew about Jerry Rice's kid. You haven't heard about the third. I can almost guarantee you that. Emory Hunt's got all kinds of intel on that guy. Here comes that conversation with the great Emory Hunt right now. There he is. There's our guy, friend of the program, Emory Hunt. You've seen him on CBS Sports. You know all of his great work on Twitter, of course, at Football Gameplan. Just an absolutely exhaustive draft guide, which is out now and you should be purchasing. We're going to talk about that. But Emory, thank you for being with us on Next Pats again, man. Always great to have you.
Always a pleasure, man. I love jumping on the show. It tells me it's closer to draft time when we hop on and talk.
No doubt. It's become an annual event for me. Always one of my most enjoyable conversations pre-draft, because you teach us so much. And again, the draft guide, unbelievable, tremendous. And I want to read a tweet from you that you sent out earlier today, because I love it. I love the numbers. I love the breakdown. Over 900 individual scouting reports in the 2024 FBGP, Football Gameplan, scouting guide. 13 live games scouted / broadcast, 8 postseason all-star games attended, 2 countries. The statistics are off the charts. Nobody grinds the way Emory Hunt grinds when it comes to pre-draft intel. So go purchase the guide right now. If you're listening to this, you're a freak when it comes to your unsatiable hunger for draft information, and Emory's draft guide is going to provide you with all you need. So please go out there. Where can they find it, Emory? Where can they purchase it? Just follow you on Twitter and they can get the link there, correct?
Footballgameplan.com/2024 draft guide.
Perfect. All right. Have you been sleeping in the last few days, sir?
Yeah, I've been getting much better sleep now than when I was putting together the guide. So, now is just, about, just constantly, talking about players and prospects and getting ready for the draft, and ultimately getting ready for day 3 when everybody else will still be talking about day 1.
That's where, listen, everyone in the draft. And so you're going to be able to tell us about, for instance, the top of your rankings at the receiver position. I really want to hammer that spot with you here today. But boy, you have, for us over the years, you have illuminated so many day 3 types, and even some of the undrafted guys that end up making their way to New England. So we already have a base of information on so many of these players because we get the opportunity to chat with you. But first, I do want to ask you about your receiver rankings, Emory, because we saw each other at the combine. You were going through that process. Then the receiver rankings hadn't quite been released. But tell us your thoughts on the guys at the very top of the board. There is still an opportunity that the Patriots may potentially, possibly, perhaps trade down, and they might be in the range of being able to pick one of these top 3 wideouts who everyone seems to love. But I think your ranking of these guys is going to be a little bit different than most others. So hit us with the guys that you view as the top receivers in this year's class in order.
No, I'm glad you prefaced it that way, because when you look at the draft holistically and not just in terms of mock drafts and Twitter, you can see value and talent, and you can see that this is teams at the top outside of Chicago, but even before Chicago traded Justin Fields, everyone had options. Like, okay, there are some scenarios here. And so, as you know, when I grade my receivers, it's just not straight 1 through 10, because I feel like these dudes play different positions. And that's why I grade them how I feel like they would best fit at said position. So I have X receivers, Z receivers, slot receivers, and what I like to classify as big inside receivers. So I like to say think in terms of Marcus Colston as the prototype of the big inside guy. Kind of could play split, kind of could play a slot, kind of shifty enough, can bang inside, shifty enough to really he can work himself open versus zone coverage. So with that being the foundation, so my X receiver number one, I have Roma Dunze. My Z receiver number one, Malik Neighbors, and number two, Keon Coleman. 3, Marvin Harrison Jr. Slot, Lat McConkey is my number one guy. I feel like he is by far one of the best receivers, regardless of one of the 3 spots in the draft. And Malachi Corley is my number 2 slot. Now, so when you look at A.D. Mitchell, I believe he's my number 2X, or Burton is my number 2X, and then Mitchell is my number 3X. So all of those guys I've mentioned are like 80 grade and above, which in my guide, I feel like these are Pro Bowl type players. And so when people say the draft is deep at receiver, this is what they're talking about, because to me, it's more like it's not like 1996. It's more like 2014 in terms of the receiver class. You're going to get some really good receivers, some productive pros that'll play for a long time. 96 is different because he saw a lot of Hall of Famers in that group, you know what I'm saying, all the way into the 3rd round with Terrell Owens. So even his son is in his draft class as a receiver and prospect. That's a really good under the radar guy, and Tariq Owens at Missouri State. That's his son, and he's a fantastic receiver. But this class, if you need a receiver, it wouldn't surprise me to see teams double up. You know, maybe take one early and then double back maybe in round 3 and take another one, because that's how deep it is with talent.
Okay, so I have a couple questions here. Number one, you have you have Marvin Harrison Jr. as a Z receiver, not an X. Why that designation for him?
I feel like he's a little bit better off the line of scrimmage. And when I say X receiver, I'm looking at guys that are consistent at getting off bump press coverage and press coverage. I feel like that's an area where Harrison still has a little bit more room to grow. You know, and a lot of this is still, you can see a Z and still think he's a great receiver, but an X, you are on the line of scrimmage, which means it's easier for teams to, you know, get their hands on you. So you got to be consistent at being able to get off that. And so I feel like when you play a little bit off the line of scrimmage, that's where you have some room to really work on your releases and perfect your craft in that way, in terms of, okay, how can I consistently get off bump press? Sometimes I'm going to have to be on the line of scrimmage. But at most, the Z receiver, you want that guy to be, he's a little bit more of a catch and run guy, right? He's a little bit more of a athlete in terms of being able to do more on the move. And I feel like you put Neighbors on the move, you put Harrison on the move, you give them an advantage to run that low crosser or mid-level crosser, or, you know, you work them off of a guy as an X receiver and allow them a free release to get open and do their thing with their route running. That's where they have the most success.
Now, my follow-up to that is, if I heard it correctly, you have Florida State's Keon Coleman rated slightly. And again, you like all these guys. All these guys are Pro Bowl types of talents for you. But you like him slightly better than Marvin Harrison Jr. And Keon Coleman is a name that we've been talking about a little bit of late, Emory, because we had Mel Kiper comments on the most recent edition of the Next Pats podcast, where he's talking about Keon Coleman. Man, if he had just run a 4.5 instead of a 4.61, probably be a first round pick. If the Patriots could get him at 34 overall, they could use some size. They could use a playmaker. You know, maybe that's the kind of guy for them. So we've been digging into that name a little bit, but you're the only person I've heard mention Coleman as potentially being a better pro than Marvin Harrison. Why do you have him where you have him?
Well, they have the same grade.
Okay.
I want to say it's like an 82.
Okay.
But I have Coleman ranked ahead of him. And the reason why is due to the fact that I feel like Coleman has better releases than Marvin Harrison. And here's why. You don't normally see guys as tall as Coleman return punts. And the reason why that matters, because one, people think if you return kicks, you return kicks. Returning kickoffs and returning punts are two different things. It requires two different skill sets. Sometimes you get a player that's special that can do both. Kickoffs, you got to be, is about acceleration and speed, because it's usually you got to hit a lane and just go. Punt return, you got to have great hands and you got to be shifty, because it's like trying to walk down the sidewalk. You know, I don't know how Boston is at rush hour, but I know how New York City is every day, right? In terms of like walking down the sidewalk, you're avoiding people, right? If you come out without touching the body, that's perfect. You know what I'm saying? You could be a punt returner, and that's what punt returning is. And I'm saying that to say his footwork is where it needs to be, because that also tells you a lot about how they can set defenders up and how they can work themselves open. So while a guy may be faster than Keon Coleman can create separation because he's so shifty within his route running and is able to quickly separate and find that opportunity. You know who else was that tall? Return punts in college. People questioned his speed, and now he's well known for his route running. Keenan Allen. And so people knocked him for that too. But Keenan Allen was the same way. Those guys can get open, and Coleman can quickly get open. He and Harrison both have elite hands, so they're both going to win above the rim. They're both going to be able to snatch the ball away from the defensive back. They both do a good job on the move in terms of catching and running, because people underestimate Coleman's ability after the catch with the ball in his hands. Harrison is the same way, and I feel like because I have seen Coleman be a little bit more nuanced in his route running in terms of his releases and a little bit more apt to get off press. That's why I have him ahead of him, despite those guys having the same grade.
Okay, so my guess is you would think, Emory, that at 34 overall, if the Patriots feel as though they'd rather go receiver there than tackle, for instance. We just talked to Elliot Wolf, who's the de facto GM here. You know, they signed Chuck Okorafor as a free agent. He's telling us that he feels he could play left tackle for them if they needed to play a game tomorrow and they needed a left tackle. Okay, so maybe if they don't feel great about any of the tackles at 34, maybe they go receiver. And you're saying Keon Coleman would be a nice pick, is my guess, in that range of the draft. Are there others that you feel at 34 will be there and could play either that X or that Z spot? It feels like they are loaded, Emory, loaded on slot receivers. They've got Pop Douglas. They've got KJ Osborne, who could be a Z potentially. They've got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's sort of a big slot. They need somebody who can play outside for them. Who do you like in that 34 overall range? Because we think they're taking a quarterback at 3 overall. So at 34, who do you think could be a good fit for them?
Well, that's always a tough part when I get asked that question by, different folks that cover different teams. Like who can they pick at this pick? Well, outside of pick number 1, I don't know how the hell the draft gonna shake out. So you never know who's gonna be there, right?
Right.
So you hope if you're, here are some guys that if they are there, definitely you want. Put it that way. Brian Thomas of LSU, if he's there. A.D. Mitchell of Texas, if he's there. Xavier Leggett of South Carolina, if he's there. Those are guys that are bona fide outside guys that can play and win. Javon Baker of UCF, if he's there. I think he's the next receiver because of how well he wins off the line of scrimmage and how confident he is when the ball is in the air. So those are guys I feel like that are there. If they are there at 34, you want to grab them on your football team in terms of specifically X type of guys that can go out there and play.
Yeah, it was interesting when we spoke to Wolf. He said, hey, listen, we feel like we've got NFL receivers in our room. Do we have somebody who in a 3-by-1 formation can be by himself on the backside and win every single time? We probably don't have that, is essentially what he said. I'm wondering if you think Javon Baker could be that guy. He's not a name that we've talked about a ton. I believe he ran in the 4.5s, maybe the low 4.5s in the 40-yard dash, but good size, contested catch ability. But what else makes him, in your opinion, somebody who would be worthy of that kind of pick potentially?
He got football speed, and he has hands that are. In my scouting report, I do have that he's very George Pickens-like in terms of snatching the football, and having that dog mentality of being. We used to call this where, we will say something and people think that doesn't make sense. But you understand when I say it, like guys that have great hands and great hand-eye coordination, you could slow the ball down with your eyes. All that's saying is your focus level of finding the point of the football and getting your hands in position to make the catch. Everything else around you doesn't matter. Whether somebody got hands in your face, you're swiping at you, or whether you're trying to jump up in traffic, all I'm focused on is the ball and the point of the football. Because if I can find a point, I'm going to catch everything thrown my way because I'm going to get my body in position to do that. And so Baker has that. That's why you see somebody that has super focus when the ball is coming his way. And at the Senior Bowl, I thought he did a great job every day, every rep, just making sure people knew who he was in terms of making a big play. The goal is to make a play a day and have people talking about you every day. And he was able to do that. The problem with Baker is that he plays for UCF. Had he just stayed at Alabama, nobody would have any questions about him playing his skill set. So it's just the fact that people look at anything that's not Power 5. I'm sorry, not even Power 5, because UCF is Power 5. Anything that's not the 10 teams that they knew already or know already and recognize is not good to them. Even though he came from Alabama, because he plays for UCF, they think he's, not as talented as he was. So that's just the nature of the beast.
Well, and hey, if he goes to the Senior Bowl and he's making a play a day, as you say, he should be putting to bed some of those concerns about, oh, he's just from UCF. Well, he goes to the Senior Bowl and he's playing against some of the best players in the country that are draft eligible. Like, there shouldn't be as many questions maybe about his overall skill set as some people may lead you to believe. Emory, let's dive a little deeper now at this position. Okay, let's say, for instance, they do take a tackle at 34 overall, but they're still looking at their roster and they're saying, God, we just have nobody with size that can play that receiver spot that could maybe eventually develop into an X for us, play on the line of scrimmage, win in contested catch situation, win down in the red zone. We could still really use that. And so now we're past 34. Now we're into the 60s, or maybe we're even in day 3. This is where that massive brain of yours gets to shine, because these guys like nobody else when it comes to the smaller school prospects, to the prospects who aren't being talked about as much as some of these guys that are getting first round consideration. So who do you like? Big bodied receiver, might be able to win on the outside. Give us some under the radar names that are not under the radar at the Emory Hunt headquarters.
How about Joshua Cephas of UT San Antonio, or UTSA, the Roadrunners? 6'2", about 200 pounds, explosive off the ball, had a lot of time on task at UTSA because they throw the football about 70% of the time, and they're in spread formation. So it's basically all one-on-ones. And he's able to win down the sideline. He's able to win across the middle of the field, inside or outside. He had a great Hula Bowl. I thought he did a great job at the Shrine Bowl as well. Cornelius Johnson of Michigan. You hear a lot of talk of his teammate, Roman Wilson. I feel like Johnson is a better receiver, bigger receiver, plays a pro game already. Kind of reminds me of Amon-Ra St. Brown, someone that just wins and understands how to play the game and how to play the position. I'm just a big fan of what he brings to the table. Tez Walker of North Carolina, a lot of people talked about him, and then they forgot about him because they use his. I'm not going to even say that. I will just say he's a very good receiver, and he's still a good receiver. He's always been a good receiver, and he's going to be a better receiver moving forward. And even Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint of Georgia, I thought he was another one that had a really good Senior Bowl. Fantastic player, speed, whatever, right? Kid gets open. So I don't care about speed. I don't care about those things. And, going even deeper, John Giles, I brought up a lot. West Florida kid, 6'2", 202, excellent leaping ability, had a really good college gridiron showcase, and got a late call up to the Hula Bowl, performed really well there. Even my number one inside receiver is Tajon Palmer out of UAB. And he's a fantastic talent because he was right there going neck and neck with Josh Cephas at the Hula Bowl. Cephas will make a play, then here comes Palmer making another big play. And he got a call up to the Shrine Bowl as well and performed excellent there also. And I'm always a big fan of Kyle Sheets out of Slippery Rock. 6'3", about 222. Stretch vertical type guy, can win off the line right away, stack and track the football rather well. He stacks the defensive back, is able to track the football, and has good football speed. I know he timed like low 4.5, high 4.4, depending on which scouts watch you want, but probably a consensus 4.51, 4.52. But man, when I talk about big playability and teams, I remember he was injured a little bit earlier in the season and missed a game, right? A game or two. His first game back, the first time they had the ball offensively, deep shot to Kyle Sheets touchdown. It's like this dude like is box office. So there's a bunch of those type guys that can play the X position that you could find maybe later day 2, day 3, and still feel good about guys that can win on the outside. Maybe they're not the splash names, but they can definitely win on the outside.
I love it. Kyle Sheets, Slippery Rock, Josh Cephas, UTSA, a Roadrunner. Have to love that if you're looking at the receiver position. And Cornelius Johnson, I'm so glad you brought him up because he did make our prototypical Patriots list this year. Emory, it's a little bit different this year. Obviously, Bill Belichick not running the draft. Elliot Wolf is running the draft. It's essentially what I put together are essentially prototypical Packers. I'm looking at guys with Packers backgrounds, what they've taken high in the draft, first couple rounds over the course of basically the last 3 decades. And Cornelius Johnson, believe it or not, hit a lot of those metrics. And what I'm looking at is mostly height, weight, speed, but I've also talked to some people who really like his ability to block. That's something that's typically appreciated here in New England. So that's a name people should certainly be keeping an eye on. I'm wondering if you have any affinity for Ryan Flournoy, the Southeast Missouri State. A relatively bigger body, right? I don't know if he would be considered a true X for you, but what are your thoughts on him? Because that was another name that made our prototypical Patriots list this year.
No, he is. He is. And I'll read you my scout report I have on a physically strong receiver that brings a level of physicality to the position that you want to see. He's very tough to bring down. And so those two things combined with the skill set makes you a very good rack guy, run after catch guy. So Southeast Missouri State had a really strong run game with Geno Hess, who's the all-time leading rusher. I think I thought he came out last year, but he went back late and packed on another 1,200-something yard season, so he really crushed a rushing number. All of that set up opportunities for Flournoy to make plays in the passing game. And so you have a bigger body wide receiver who went down to the Senior Bowl, had a solid week. Because all you want to see when you're there, if you're the FCS guy or the D2 guy, you want to see him going up against the P5 competition consistently. Because you could go and dominate the Ohio Valley Conference, and I guess it's the alliance because they joined with the Big South for this season. You can go dominate that level, but you want to see him consistent on the guys he's going to be playing against at the NFL level. And I thought he had a good week. So yeah, he's another one. He is I would grade 18th split in. So that's how valuable this receiver core is. Our class is. I'm sorry.
I do have to ask you. It's the last thing I'll ask you, Emory, and I'm going to refer back to something that you said a little bit earlier. But I thought there were only 2 sons of Hall of Fame receivers in this year's draft class. And you're telling me there are 3. So it's not just Marvin Harrison Jr. It's not just Brandon Rice. It's Terrell Owens' son as well. Tell us a little bit more about him and what kind of receiver he is. Is he considered, in your opinion, is he going to, maybe be a draft pick or more of an undrafted guy? Tell us a little bit about T.O.'s kid.
Well, it's fascinating because all of these tape watchers and all of these people that have been to the Senior Bowl only, and all these people that have been to all of these, that come out and talk about, their list or their guides, and how can no one have brought up Tariq Owens, But there's always a tweet, Phil. There's always a tweet, because if you go back and search my name with his name, you'll see I've talked about him since last year, or earlier in the season. And didn't even mention he's Terrell Owens' son. Why? Why would I? Right? Because I'm not trying to do this for clicks or whatnot or engagement. I want people to keep it about ball. But yes, he is T.O.'s son, and he runs exactly like him too. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. He's very solid as a move piece. I have him graded as a Z receiver. So I feel like off the ball, he makes a quick move, get on that low crosser, that mid-level crosser, physical across the middle of the field, will break a couple tackles, and does a great job in playing after the catch. So he is someone I feel like got better throughout his career at Missouri State. He started his career at Florida Atlantic before transferring to Missouri State. And it's pretty cool because, again, they had before when he got there last year, I can't remember when Coach Petrino left and went to A&M. I think it was this season. So he was coached by Bobby Petrino in that passing game. And people forget, man, this kid 6'2", 200 pounds, athlete. You love the genetics. You love the pedigree. He has that in spades. That's someone that you want to see. And so I have a couple of video. I have a video clip in one of those tweets talking about his game, and spotlighting some plays that he had. And once I think it was against Southern Illinois or Utah Tech. But go check that out and let me know what you think. But this is someone whose route running is solid. You would expect that, who his dad is and how his dad trains him. And he's definitely flying under the radar. It wouldn't remember how last year I talked about Colton Dowell a lot out of UT Martin, and he ends up getting drafted day 3 by the Titans, and everybody was like, dang, who the hell that dude was? But he was someone that stood out in the All-Star game, the College Gridiron Showcase. I feel like Tariq Owens has that chance to really get drafted on day 3. One, because he's a good player, upside, all of those things, but he has pedigree, and no one's talking about it. I just find that fascinating. One of the best receivers of all time, his son, is in this draft class, and it's gone undiscussed.
This is why we love talking to you, Emory. It does not shock me at all that you've been talking about this guy for a year, and I'm just hearing about him for the first time here right now. I am Mr. Johnny Come Lately. You know that. That's why I lean on you so frequently, especially this time of year, for this kind of insight, and our listeners do as well. So now you're going to have people all over the greater New England region searching for Tariq Owens, Missouri State, not only Slippery Rock, not only UTSA, but Tariq Owens as well. Emory, thank you so much for giving us all the wisdom that you have shared with us today. You do it for us every single year. You never let us down. We so appreciate your time, man. You're such a busy guy these days. So again, thank you, and enjoy draft weekend, my friend. This is it. We're right there. Feels like Christmas Eve, man. We're so close.
I can't wait, man. Always a pleasure being on. Thanks for bringing me on every year, man. It's a fun discussion. And I appreciate the support. And to remind people, man, if you've purchased a guide since 2020, when I put those things out digitally, right now you would have your hands on over 4,300 individual scouting reports. That's just insane. So not only would you know the NFL, you probably know the CFL, UFL, European League of Football. You'd have a pretty good grasp on everybody.
You are unquestionably going to be smarter for purchasing Emory's draft guide. You should be doing it each and every year. I do. It's a tremendous, tremendous resource. And I do it every single year because I know nobody works harder. Nobody grinds more than Emory Hunt on the draft year after year. Thanks again, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate you, man. Always a pleasure.
I should have told you. This is on me. This is on me, everybody. Should have told you to pull out the notepad and pen, because Slippery Rock, UTSA, Missouri State, the names on top of names on top of names. Some great ones there, though, that we should be really focused in on. And Cornelius Johnson, don't forget about Cornelius. Cornelius Johnson, you got a lot of intel, a lot of insight on Ryan Flournoy. Cornelius Johnson, 6'3", 212, ran a 4.44, 40-yard dash, 37.5-inch vertical, 10'7" broad. This guy's explosive. He's fast. Not the quickest shuttle time. So he didn't check that box for our prototypical Patriots list at 4.37. He also has small hands, which could be just a small issue for Elliott Wolf. Of the 18 players we studied who were taken in the first and second round by Ron Wolf disciples, or Ron Wolf himself, of those 18, only one player had hands that measured less than 9 inches. Cornelius Johnson's at 8.6. So maybe that's a factor. But when you factor in his toughness, his understanding of a pro system, which they used at Michigan, we know they didn't throw the ball that much because of how much we've been talking about J.J. McCarthy, so his stats aren't gaudy. But he's going to block. He's going to be tough. He's played in the elements. He's got great size, 6'3", 212, great speed, great explosiveness. That's a pretty nice package of traits right there for, who knows, 5th round, 6th round, maybe even a little bit later than that. If some of these receivers get pushed down because it is such a deep draft class. Great stuff there from Emory Hunt. Really appreciate him joining Expats. Really appreciate Daniel Jeremiah doing what he does every year around this time, meeting with the media and going hours and hours back and forth with us, answering all questions and providing great insight. I was lucky. I got to ask the first question to Daniel Jeremiah. Got fresh Daniel Jeremiah synapses for that particular answer. I appreciated it. Hopefully you did as well. Always appreciate John the Skull Crusher Henry for grinding away on all these podcasts. Patriots Talk, Next Pats, Celtics Talk. Go check out Chris Forsberg on the Celtics Talk podcast. Skull Crusher crushing as usual. You're crushing as well. You're crushing days. Just a handful of them now until the draft. I'm psyched. I hope you are too. Keep an eye out for our final pre-draft Next Pats podcast early next week. We're going to be getting our guy, Albert Breer, on. We've done this every year, another annual guest around this time every single year to talk about what we're hearing. Who's going where? What are the trends? What does it sound like might happen on Thursday night? We'll have a ton of fun on that podcast. Keep an eye out for that one. We'll talk to you then.